A collision of titans when Meryl Streep and Whoopi Goldberg clashed on live TV. Hold on to your seats, because this is a story, a moment that set daytime television ablaze. A clash so intense, so unfiltered, it left mouse agape hearts pounding, and the internet in a frenzy for weeks. Two of Hollywood's fiercest icons, Meryl Streep, the queen of drama, whose every performance feels like a revelation, and Whoopi Goldberg, the fearless host, who never backs away from truth, collided in a confrontation that was less a talk show segment and more a seismic cultural event. This wasn't just a debate. It was a battle of legacies, philosophies, and raw emotion unfolding under the scorching studio lights of The View. Before we plunge into this electrifying showdown, smash that subscribe button on Prime Narrator and hit like to stay tuned for the next Hollywood saga that'll leave you stunned. Share your thoughts in the comments as you read. Whose side are you on in this epic face-off? Let's dive in the studio lights. At The View burned brighter than ever that morning, casting a golden glow to set the audience buzz with excitement and nervous energy, their whispers filling the air like static. Before a storm, it wasn't every day that Meryl Streep, the most celebrated actress of her generation, stepped onto a daytime talk show stage. She walked in wearing a tailored charcoal gray suit, elegant, yet sharp, her expression calm, but her eyes hinting at something deeper, attention humming beneath her poised surface. Across the table, Whoopi Goldberg sat at the center of the panel, adjusting her glasses with deliberate care, her posture relaxed. But her gaze, piercing, there was history here, years of subtle jabs and interviews, clashing political views, and an undercurrent of rivalry between two giants who ruled the same industry, but rarely shared the same spotlight that history was about to ignite. The opening minutes unfolded smoothly, almost too smoothly. Sunny Hostin, one of the co-hosts, tossed Meryl a gentle question about her latest film, a period drama, that critics raving. Meryl answered with her signature grace, her voice warm and measured, painting vivid images of her craft. The audience leaned in, charmed, as always, by her eloquence. But then, like a ship veering off course, the conversation shifted. It started innocently enough, a question about Hollywood's evolving landscape, touching on hot-button issues like accountability, representation, and power dynamics. These were the topics The View thrived on, the kind that could spark lively debate, or as it turned out, ignite a firestorm. Whoopi, her voice laced with humor, and Edge leaned back in her chair and fixed her gaze on Meryl. "So, Meryl," she began, her tone deceptively casual, "you've been called a voice of conscience in Hollywood for decades, but a lot of folks out there feel like you stayed quiet on some of the biggest issues. Do you think you've spoken up enough when it really mattered?" The question landed like thunder. The studio air seemed within the audience, shifting in their seats, sensing the spark that could set the whole place ablaze. Meryl's smile faltered just for a heartbeat before she took a slow, deliberate breath. Her voice, when she spoke, was cool, but laced with something sharper than usual. "I've always believed in speaking through my work," she said. "I don't think shouting the loudest always changes the world. Sometimes it's the stories you tell that do." Whoopi's eyebrows arched, and a small, knowing smile curled at her lips. "That's a nice answer," she set, her tone carrying a hint of challenge. "But don't you think silence can sometimes look like complicity?" A collective gasp rippled to the audience, followed by a low murmur. The cameras zoomed in on Meryl's face, catching the moment. Her eyes hardened, her jaw tightening ever so slightly. "Silence," she said, her voice dropping to a steely whisper, "is not the same as complicity. I don't think you get to decide what other people's silence means." Attention. The room was suddenly alive, a pulsing force that swept through the studio. The audience's chatter faded into a stunned hush. Sunny Hostin shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her notes forgotten. This wasn't a friendly chat anymore. It was a showdown. Whoopi crossed her arms, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not deciding for you, Meryl," she said, her voice steady, but pointed him, just asking a question a lot of people want to ask when things were breaking down in the industry. When young actors were speaking out, some of us were standing up loudly and some weren't. Meryl leaned forward, now her composure sharpening into something like defiance. "And some of us," she said, her words slicing through the air, "were fighting battles you never even saw." Quietly behind the scenes, without cameras, the studio fell silent, the air crackling with electricity. In the second row, a woman clutched her purse, her mouth half open, as if to stifle a gasp. The moderator, Joy Behar, tried to steer the conversation back to safer waters, tossing out a question about Meryl's film, but it was too late. The energy at the table had shifted. This was no longer an interview. It was two titans locking horns under the unforgiving glare of live television. And then Whoopi leaned in just a fraction closer, her voice dropping to a low, steely edge. "Sometimes quiet battles don't change a damn thing." The words hit like a gut punch. The first time Meryl's massive calm cracked, a flicker of anger flashing across her face. That she replied, her words slow and deliberate, is an easy thing to say when you've made a career out of talking not everyone needs a stage to. Make a difference, the audience gasped again, louder this time, a few people clapping before catching themselves unsure. If it was appropriate, the camera operator zoomed out to capture both women in the frame, Meryl poised, but simmering, and Whoopi unflinching, her subtle smile carrying a hint of challenge. It was a kind of moment that made live television electric, a raw, unscripted clash with no safety net. Just when it seemed the exchange might cool, Whoopi tilted her head and said almost too softly, "Funny thing about stories, Meryl. They only matter if people believe you still care." Meryl's lips parted as if to respond, but she stopped herself. The pause was heavy, almost cinematic in its weight. The audience sat frozen, their eyes darting between the two women. It was clear to everyone in that studio, and to the millions that soon watched the clip online, that this wasn't just a disagreement. It was a clash of philosophies, of legacies, of egos. A whisper spread to the crowd, like wildfire. "Did you see her face? Did you hear what Whoopi said?" The silence that followed Whoopi's words stretched across the studio like a taut wire ready to snap, and this was only the beginning. The studio lights dimmed slightly as the show cut to a commercial break, but the tension lingered like smoke in the air. Meryl's eyes stayed locked on Whoopi's, her usual warmth replaced by a steely resolve that audiences had only seen in her most intense film roles. In the third row, a man lowered his phone, paused his recording. As if the moment demanded his full attention, the audience shifted restlessly, their faces a mix of discomfort and anticipation. They knew they were witnessing something extraordinary, two legends shedding the polished mask of Hollywood for something raw and real. Joy Behar cleared her throat, her voice tinged with nerves. "Let's maybe shift gears and talk about." But before she could finish, Meryl leaned forward, her elbows resting lightly on the table, her voice low but sharp. "You know, Whoopi, for someone who spent years telling others to listen, you don't seem all that interested in hearing the quiet ways people try to do good. Now everyone wants a spotlight." When they stand up, the room quivered with the weight of her words. A few audience members murmured, some nodding in agreement, others glancing at Whoopi for her response. Whoopi's smile tightened, a flicker of frustration breaking through her calm. "Oh, I'm listening, Meryl," she said, her voice steady but edged with heat. "I just think the world moves because people get loud. Staying quiet might feel noble, but sometimes it's just safe, and safe doesn't change anything." Meryl's eyes narrowed, her hands folding neatly in front of her. As if to anchor herself safe, she repeated, her voice quiet but piercing, "Do you think it was safe to go up against studios when I was a young actress, to demand respect for women on sets when it wasn't fashionable?" Don't mistake the lack of headlines for a lack of courage. The audience let out a collective breath, some clapping softly, others leaning forward, as if drawn into the gravity of the moment. Whoopi leaned back, her arms still crossed, her gaze never leaving Meryl's. "I get it," she said, her tone softer, but no less pointed. "You've been in this business a long time, but you can't hide behind history. I'm talking about the here and now, when things were breaking down in the industry, when survivors needed someone like you to speak up. Where were you, on stage collecting awards, or behind closed doors telling stories?" The word stung, and the audience reacted. A woman in the front row pressed her hand to her chest. Another whispered to her neighbor. She didn't just say that. The air was electric charged with the anticipation of Meryl's response. Meryl's lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment it seemed she might not answer. Then she spoke, her voice calm but heavy with the weight of unspoken battles. "I was in rooms you weren't invited to," she said. "I was helping people you'll never hear about. Because sometimes making a difference isn't about being seen, it's about being effective. I don't parade my efforts because that turns it into a performance. And that's not what helping should look like." Her words landed with quiet force, earning murmurs of approval from parts of the audience. But others looked to Whoopi, sensing she wasn't done. Whoopi's voice softened, but there was steel beneath it. "See, that's the thing people need to see you. They need to know someone at your level cares enough to stand with them, to be visible. Quiet is noble, but sometimes it looks a whole lot like distance, and that's hard to forgive." The moderator, Joy, glanced at her notes, clearly torn between intervening and letting the drama unfold. Meryl sat back, her eyes still burning with restrained fire. "I care," she said, her voice low and deliberate. "I've always cared, but I want to apologize for not doing it in a way that wins applause." The audience erupted in a mix of applause and uneasy silence, some nodding in support, others unsure what to land. A man in the second row muttered to his neighbor, "This is getting real." His voice caught by a nearby microphone. Whoopi's smile widened, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe that's the difference between us," she said. "I've never been afraid of applause or the criticism that comes with it. I'd rather take the heat than let people think I'm sitting out the tension." Had shifted now, turning personal. Meryl's hands tightened slightly on the table, a subtle sign of the emotion She was holding back, Whoopi. She said, her voice steady, but pointed. For someone who claims to be fearless, you seem to thrive on conflict. It's not always about being the loudest voice in a room. Sometimes it's about listening even when it's inconvenient. The remark landed like a dart, precise, and cutting the audience. Gasped again, louder now, sensing the conversation had tipped into something deeply personal. Joy tried to interject, her voice faltering. Ladies, perhaps we can. But Whoopi raised a hand, her eyes locked on Meryl. No, let's finish this, she said, because I think a lot of people watching feel like I do. We've admired you, Meryl. We've watched your performances, listened to your speeches, but admiration isn't the same as trust. When people needed you to use your voice, we didn't hear you. That's what I'm saying. The words hit like a wave, reverberating through the studio. Some audience members nodded, others shifted, uncomfortably caught between two icons. They revered Meryl's voice. When it came, carried a faint tremor of controlled emotion. Maybe you didn't hear me, because you weren't listening, she said. Maybe the noise drowned out the quiet work being done by so many who don't crave the camera. I won't be shamed for not doing things your way. The audience broke into spontaneous applause, though some hesitated, unsure whether to fully commit. Producer in the wings gestured frantically for a commercial break, but the director in the booth held off. This was ratings gold, a kind of unscripted drama that couldn't be manufactured. Whoopi leaned forward, her voice soft. But cutting this isn't about shame, she says, about accountability. If the world can't count on people like you to speak up when it matters, then who's left? Meryl's eyes glistened not with tears, but with a restrained fire that made her seem almost regal. I've given my life to stories that needed to be told, she said, and it'll keep doing that. But I won't let anyone, including you, tell me my voice only matters when it's loud enough for the cameras. The audience roared, some clapping wildly, others shaking their heads. Torn between the two women in the studio, felt like an arena with Meryl and Whoopi as gladiators wielding words instead of swords. For a moment, neither spoke. The cameras captured them in a split screen. Meryl, her jaw tight, but her gaze unwavering. Whoopi leaning back, her expression a mix of defiance and grudging respect. Joy, her voice shaky. Finally, cutting. We need to go to a break. The show cut to commercials, but the tension lingered as the lights dimmed. Meryl turned to Whoopi, her voice low, meant only for her. You and I both know this isn't about today's headlines. It's about years of resentment, isn't it? Whoopi glanced at her, then looked away without answering. The audience buzzed, whispering to each other, recounting the exchange like witnesses to history. A young woman in the third row leaned to her friend and whispered, I didn't think it would get this intense. It's like a movie, but real. When the cameras blinked back on the set, looked deceptively calm. The hosts had rearranged their notes, their coffee mugs untouched, but the air crackled with unresolved energy like the calm before a storm. Second wave. Meryl sat with impeccable posture, her fingers loosely intertwined, a faint tremor betraying her restraint. Whoopi's expression had softened slightly, but her eyes still held a spark of challenge. Joy forced a smile, addressing the viewers. Welcome back. We've been having a passionate discussion about the role of public voices in times of change. I think our audience is very engaged. A smattering of awkward applause followed the audience, unsure whether to clap or hold their breath. Meryl smiled faintly, her eyes fixed on Whoopi. Passionate is one word for it, she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of someone with more to say. Whoopi turned to the viewers, her tone measured but firm. Look, this isn't about me versus Meryl. This is about what people expect from those they admire. When the world's on fire, they don't just want performances, they want action. They want to know the people they put on pedestals will stand beside them. Meryl let out a soft breath, almost imperceptible, but heavy with restraint. And what if she said, her voice steady, coming down from that pedestal means losing the ability to reach them at all. If you think the films we make don't change, minds don't shift cultures, then maybe you don't understand why we tell stories. A remark drew murmurs from the audience, some nodding, others waiting for Whoopi's response. Whoopi's voice softened, tinged with sorrow. I understand the power of stories. I've told a few myself, but there's a difference between telling a story and standing up when the people who believe in your stories are fighting for their lives. Stories inspire, but voices, real present voices, can save. Meryl paused, choosing her words carefully. I've stood up more times than you'll ever know, she said, her voice low and personal. I've left dinners with powerful people because they wouldn't respect the women on my set. I've turned down scripts that didn't treat people with dignity. I don't need applause for those choices. I just needed to do them. The audience murmured louder now, some clapping, others shaking their heads. Whoopi didn't flinch. Then why not tell those stories? She asked, why let people think you were silent? Don't you think the young women fighting for their place in this industry would have wanted to know They weren't alone. The question landed hard, and Meryl blinked her composure, wavering for a moment of silence that followed with stick the cameras hesitating to zoom in, because the moment you tell the world, Meryl said, her voice soft. But pain, it stops being about the people you helped, it becomes about you, and that's not why I did eat a few audience members clap to sound tentative, but heartfelt. Whoopi leaned forward, her voice softening. I get that, but sometimes the silence feels like absence, and that absence leaves scars. Meryl's fingers flexed on the table, her voice trembling slightly. Do you think I don't carry scars too? Do you think it was easy to stay in an industry that treated women as disposable? Don't mistake my restraint for apathy. I care. I've always cared. The audience fell silent, sensing the weight of the moment. Not just a clash of egos, but a collision of deeply held beliefs. The exchange stretched on each word, a carefully aimed arrow, each pause heavy with meaning. The audience was no longer just watching. They were part of their reactions, rippling through the studio. A woman in the back whispered her friend, "This is history." A man in the front row clutched his program, his eyes wide. The producers, sensing the moment's intensity, let the cameras roll, capturing every glance, every shift in posture. Meryl and Whoopi weren't just debating. They were laying bare the complexities of power, responsibility, and legacy in an industry that demanded both art and activism. As the segment neared its end, Joy made one final attempt to lighten the mood, tossing out a question about Meryl's upcoming projects. But the audience wasn't interested in small talk, and neither were the two women at the table. Meryl leaned forward one last time, her voice quiet but resolute. "I've spent my life telling stories that matter," she said, "and I'll keep doing that in my way, on my terms. If that's not enough for some, I can live with that, but I won't let anyone tell me how to fight." Whoopi nodded, slowly, her expression unreadable. "And I'll keep asking the questions," she said, "because that's my fight, and I think people deserve to hear the answers." The audience erupted in applause, a mix of admiration, tension, and all. The cameras panned across the set, capturing the final moments of a confrontation that will be dissected, memed, and debated for weeks. As the show wrapped, Meryl and Whoopi exchanged a glance, not quite reconciliation, but a mutual acknowledgement of the battle. They just fought. The studio lights dimmed, but the energy lingered, a testament to the power of two women who refused to back down. This clash wasn't just a moment on daytime TV. It was a cultural touchstone, a raw, unscripted collision of two giants whose words echoed far beyond the studio walls. The internet exploded with clips of the exchange, racking up millions of views, hashtags trending, and think pieces flooding every outlet. Some praised Meryl's restraint, her commitment to quiet activism. Others championed Whoopi's call for visible accountability. But one thing was undeniable. This was a moment that would be remembered, a showdown that redefined what it means to have a voice in Hollywood. So whose side are you on? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Prime Narrator for more stories that shake the world. The next Hollywood showdown is just around the corner. Will you be ready?